Good morning, everyone. I'm Beth Ketterman. I'm director of the Health Sciences Library at East Carolina University in the U.S., and I am the current information coordinator and incoming chair of the Health and Biosciences Library section at IFLA. It's been terrific work, and I'm so delighted to be a part of the association. I'm also really delighted to be here this morning, especially in light of hearing about the visa and passport issues of some of our colleagues. I made it, my luggage did not. And so I just have to say I am so looking forward to getting out of my airplane attire as soon as possible. And so it's my pleasure to introduce the speakers for the first of two sub-themes at our satellite on regional impact studies, Reysa Alexander and Emmy Sang. First up, we have Reysa. Dr. Reysa Alenzuela is the head librarian at the Library of the Oriental Institute of the Czech Academy of Sciences and a full professor consultant on publication and research at Central Philippine University. She was the senior librarian at the University of the South Pacific Vanuatu, the expert manager at Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan, the director of the Thomas Jefferson Information Center, U.S. Embassy Manila, and the director of the University of Iloilo Learning Resource Center in the Philippines. She is currently a co-editor of ALA International Relations Roundtable's International Leads and consulting editor of the Journal of Information Science Theory and Practice. Reysa, the floor is yours. Oh, and I'll say we're going to have our presenters each deliver their presentation, and we'll hold questions for the end after they have both presented.
Shift to my presentation. Jesus, I might need some help here. Is that my presentation? Okay.
Yeah.
So down, we're just down. Okay, thank you. Just a So good morning once again. I'm Reysa Alenzuela. And first of all, I'd like to sincerely thank the IFLA ARL and the selection committee for this opportunity to share kind of my basic study. The purpose of my presentation is just very simple, to involve in the discussion of global research and scholarly communication, the countries that I was able to include in my study. Coming from the library of the Oriental Institute, it has been a discussion a while ago as well with the name of my institute itself, but let's leave the controversy behind for now. And thinking that I also came from a country which has a moniker called Pearl of the Orient Seas. So, anyway, I'm here because it's just basically out of curiosity, and I've been involved in the Czech Academy of Sciences open science initiatives. But given that we are dealing with the East, so we'll basically, and having my own personal experiences, I have somehow about 140 languages in my collections. So for me, it just ignited my curiosity to look into the core values of open science in general. Okay, so basically just a bit of the outline of a study that I developed, which is actually just a preliminary part of the study. So as we always say, open science should encompass a wide range of knowledge and practices. And we wanted to involve participants with diverse needs, from scientific community to indigenous knowledge and local knowledge groups, right? So this is where I'm coming from. Despite all of these issues in my observation, given that although I work in Europe, I work in Czech Republic, our focus are the studies of the East. I don't know, that's already politically correct. But open science, as we might say to describe a few, is that it's still confined. Some say it's weird and uncontextualized. So with that, but coming from, I think could really say, I've already been to 5 countries or 4 countries. I was seeing the role of the libraries in developing open science and specifically in open access. So I just thought of like starting this with a conversation on how can libraries influence the forces at play in the current landscape, and how can libraries serve as connectors in marginalized communities and individuals in the current system, particularly in resource-limited areas and countries with some unique, how would I say, is political dynamics. So basically, I tried to expand the study more, but I was able to only cover 7 countries. But somehow I was able to cover the 3 regions: South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Central Asia. So basically, this is just a very simple study that I have just to manage your expectations. So I will be discussing a bit of what I was able to gather in my interview with the key informants. So one of the topics of this discussion is about frameworks and policies at the national and institutional level. Sad to say, I was able only to get 1 representative per country and 1 university, academic research university, for that matter. Also, I looked into the strategies employed by libraries to facilitate the discovery and dissemination of scholarly information across disciplines, the librarian's role in open science in general, as well as the most important thing, the challenges where we somehow get to evolve our discussion in, and the strategies to address those challenges, and hopefully this will guide towards future directions and implementation pathways. As I was mentioning a while ago, my goal is very simple: to involve non-mainstream countries in this discussion and see the interplay of political, cultural, religious factors. So just a bit of an overview. Most of you may have known this, but I just wanted to explain a bit, contextualize it. So in my observation, among the countries that I'm fully aware of or have done research on, there was still no legal framework in these parts of Central Asia. And according to World Report 2022, in Turkmenistan, even the internet is highly censored. When it comes to development of repositories, what I think most of you already knew is that a lot of repositories have started in libraries and major libraries and university libraries. So as of now, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyz Republic, and Tajikistan has some repositories are registered in Open Door, but most likely there's still some which are not, but they are already are in an open repository. There are a lot of initiatives going on, but it's kind of, I don't know if I have the right term, sporadic. So Kazakhstan, on the institutional level, coming from Nazarbayev University, they have established it as early as 2016. Kyrgyz Republic has this just participated and created the Open Access Working Group. Uzbekistan, I know, is actively involved in UNESCO Open Science Working Group. But the rest of the countries, although I have a bit of an interaction, I'm not so sure about their initiatives. So for Kazakhstan, as a representative, hopefully in Central Asia, specifically at Nazarbayev University, coming from my key informant, what she mentioned is that Kazakhstan is just starting to develop a national framework that's part of the discussion. I would probably it would be probably safe to say that they have started this discussion even just on the library level, because I think last year that was even the theme of one of the European conferences they had, where me, Matt Void, and Raymond has actually participated in. That's called the Eurasian Libraries Conference. So their theme is open access. It's really open access. But however, there's no single policy framework at this point. And what she significantly noted when I interviewed her is that the Ministry of Education doesn't pay much attention. There are more universities that have their own repositories. It might be some of the repositories have been in other languages, but the thing is, they're not open for public. As for the initiatives in Nazarbayev University, in 2019, an open access policy has been approved, which encouraged the academic community to share their works in repository and in open access platforms, which is for me like an interesting move, given that actually Nazarbayev University is quite a new university. When it comes to South Asia, I just got the perspectives from Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. So basically, as early as 2017, Bangladesh has already had this platform for advocating for open access, open data, and open education called Open Access Bangladesh. Sri Lanka, they doesn't really mention, it's like it's an initiative on open access, but the National Science Foundation, if you look at the platform and as what librarians perceive it to be, they actually is the one that leads on open access, if I'm not mistaken. They facilitate research, development, and innovation and make it available for open access. So that's what I mentioned. Say, for example, so when it comes to Bangladesh, it's more of a small groups and institutions that popularize open access movement. But in Sri Lanka, the main the main mover is the National Science Foundation, which has this bunch of information. The most recently developed was the Global Digital Platform, which was launched in 2022. And some of the projects are actually a work of various stakeholders, not only in the government and the universities, but also in collaboration with some international organizations or non-governmental bodies. Say, for example, as far as I know, the Sri Lankan Science Online or the Sri Lankan Journal System is actually developed by INASF. I need to be very careful about what it is. One moment. So that's the National Science Foundation. It was, it's the Network for the Availability of Scientific Publications, which is an international non-governmental organization which worked with the University of Kelania to develop the Sri Lanka Journals Online. It's a platform for where they share all their information to increase the visibility and accessibility of Sri Lankan research. So it's kind of a collaboration among a lot of parties, but it's still, what they say is it's not still very, how do you say this, cohesive. And, but there's also the university-based institutional repositories, and as far as I know, most of them are using the same platform, say DSpace, so that they could make sure that this is, they have a way to interact with each other. When it comes to the current status in Southeast Asia, definitely Malaysia and Thailand are more on the advanced level. They have the MOSP in Malaysia, or the Malaysia Open Science platform. They have more repositories. But one thing interesting is that Myanmar, we all know the case of Myanmar, right? I know a bit about it because I teach students who are coming from Myanmar. So no government agency on open science. They have this portal for research, which is called MERAL, which, as far as I know, it was developed in collaboration with the Electronic Information for Libraries, and it used to be with a project with Myanmar Rectors Committee, National Education Policy Commission, Department of Higher Education of Myanmar, and the Ministry of Education, along with another international institute, National Institute of Informatics in Japan. But what's interesting about MERAL is that, well, despite all that is going on right now in Myanmar, there are 46 universities which are participating and contributing to this, and the one who are advocating it or are connecting this is the Myanmar Library Association, and there's still other institutional repositories that are still maintained until now. Another interesting part that I knew about when it comes to Myanmar is that somewhere in 2015, 2016, IFL had these agreements with authors in Myanmar to publish in open access at waived or discounted article processing charges. That was kind of a good initiative. However, it was not fully implemented and discontinued. The very basic problem they have is the IP address. So the power of even just the IP address. In the Philippines, that's my country, but sad to say, these are what I found out as a result. No government agency is taking charge of open science. There was a law, as far as I know, that has been passed in 2016 about open government, and that all records in the Philippines should be accessible. However, not all websites are even working well. But there are now 9 institutional repositories which are registered in Open Door, and there are more which has been developed through the initiative of some librarians. Even especially in my region, I'm from the central part of the Philippines. Before I left for Prague to work the Czech at the Oriental Institute. We actually developed some repositories during COVID time. So hopefully that was kind of the base initiatives that is going to continue to grow. When it comes to Thailand, so there was what they described it, the open science evolved bottoms-up approach. So it started with libraries and institutional initiatives, and now hopefully they're looking forward to having a legal framework coming from the government. But they said that the government is more supportive. So that's one thing good about it. And they have repositories and a national online journal system. But still, I just wanted to note, coming from the recommendation of Southeast Asia Network Open Science, that in Southeast Asia, there's still a need to set national policies, definitely retool university for research, make space for openness, and reflect and adopt on the practices in order for it to be fully implemented. When it comes to strategies employed, I just wanted to highlight a few things here that has been done. Again, from Central Asia, coming from Nazarbayev University. Well, basically, as of now, there's already, the library is already engaged in negotiations with international publishers where they have subscriptions securing open access publishing for all faculty and researchers, but still what they highlighted is the fact that subscription costs remain considerably high. And of course, another thing that that's really interesting in Nazarbayev University is that they have been promoting open access as early as 2016, and they were very dynamic about it. There were some programs, they played games. It's kind of a party when we have this open access week. There's a series of events that has been done. I used to be there, so I knew the activities. And actually, as I've mentioned, one of the things that they did in order to promote open science and open access is this Eurasian Library Conference. So that's where they discuss all these things. And speaking of diversity, it's always given that it's Kazakhstan, so the presentations are always in 3 languages. That would be Kazakh, Russian, and English. In Southeast Asia, there's still kind of, how to say it, on the level, some are still in the level of awareness raising, and it's kind of an initiative which is restricted or just concentrated on specific institutions. But basically, libraries are trying to educate faculty and researchers about the pathways for publishing their works open access. And as I mentioned a while ago, on the institutional level, there were open access platforms and repositories that they've developed. In Asia, in Southeast Asia, it's kind of different. when I talked about discovery, and I actually wanted to delve deeper, supposedly about like, what about gender-based data? What about indigenous and minority groups and knowledge, access to the knowledge or researches about that? But like, this is all I can get for now. In Malaysia, well, basically they've been conducting to promote open science, open access, and open data. I think they're pretty robust in that. One thing I know is that the former director of University of Malaya has been very active with open science. But if I try to say it correctly, librarians has been participating more on doing the technical work. So like they said that it's a huge task for libraries to promote open access and open science by, say, specifically doing, say, reviewing data submitted or providing guidance and step-by-step in research data management and promoting or guiding in open access publishing. In Myanmar, they just mentioned about the consortia of libraries as the kind of movers to facilitate discovery and dissemination of scholarly information. In the Philippines, there's a strong support from the university available for all, but I will mention later what are these challenges behind, but they're still just on the awareness awareness raising level when it comes to strategies. Okay. When it comes to the role of librarians, I just wanted to highlight a few from Nazarbayev University. So basically, their point of connecting people is through their infrastructure, the open access repository, encouraging scholars to participate and to share. They also have this sharing of open access movement, not only with scholars, but also with Kazakhstani librarian. So they conduct an annual training which highlights this awareness or the development of skills when it comes to developing open access and promoting open access. They're about to develop the research support department, so that's one of those things that they're hoping they could strengthen the way they're going to promote open science and open access. When it comes to Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, I just wanted to note and to quote some of the things that they mentioned to me. In Bangladesh, they said that or from the perspective of my key informant, researchers are not interested to seek help from library until they are bound. So that still happens while we're already discussing about AI and all this data and the bigger issues. That's still the problem on this part of the world. It's like kind of awareness level is still the discussion within, and it's still stuck on this concentric circle. In Sri Lanka, so they say that libraries serve as gateway to offer comprehensive search tools and databases, but they also partner with other stakeholders, and they're actively involved in knowledge dissemination. When it comes to Malaysia, Southeast Asia, so as I've mentioned, Malaysia has been working closely to conduct workshop, and that's the most they're doing right now in the process of creating strategies where librarians can be more actively involved or in more in-depth way. For Myanmar, despite all their limitations, Myanmar Library Association is still developing or continues to develop infrastructures, and now their new initiative is developing citizen science. And but when I discussed about like, what about data? Are you aware of how can we integrate gender equality issues and social inclusion? They said like the discussion level, even these are not yet on their end because their struggle is different. In the Philippines, we're also stuck with two main issues, which I personally observed that. The discussion is still focused on accreditation and continuing professional development, that open science is still kind of introduced from my perspective of library in the central region of the country. In Thailand, the libraries are advocating for open science and open data. They coordinate with different departments in the universities, like the typical structure, but they also are kind of focused on the technical work and checking metadata and probably creating, as I think, as a small initiative which can contribute to bibliodiversity, probably. So yeah. When it comes to Southeast Asia, it's like they try to connect in their own way as well. But there are still some gaps. Say, for example, Malaysia and Thailand are more advanced with their initiatives, but I think there's still a need for to consider the needs and perspectives of individuals with disabilities in marginalized group, which is still not in the discussion. As I've mentioned, Myanmar leaders, library leaders are relentless in keeping progress to continue to promote culture of open sharing. In the Philippines, there's still a need to advocate more for open science. When it comes to challenges, Kazakhstan mentioned four. So one is psychological readiness, both of librarians and researchers. Librarians think that they're not ready to discuss or to even just provide research support. To researchers, it's kind of the hesitation. They have concerns on copyright issues. And another two more things that are faced by librarians in Kazakhstan is that they are understaffed to deal specifically on this key initiative on open science and open access. And for them, like when you talk about open science, it always involves technology, but there's this fast turnover or brain drain happening that, especially with IT staff, that they cannot push through without being hampered. When it comes to challenges, again, for Bangladesh, they highlighted inadequate level of awareness for researchers and limited opportunities for librarians. In Sri Lanka, there is the lack of national level policy, which subsequently also involved insufficient funding. And they were hoping that for two things: incentivizing researchers to publish in open access journals and funding for APCs. Also need for technical infrastructure, as well as resistance to change, issues on copyright and licensing, language diversity, and they also highlighted the issue of long-term preservation of the materials, despite all those initiatives that had been mentioned a while ago. In Southeast Asia, still almost the same recurring pattern, that there's resistance, psychological unpreparedness, and this perception towards librarians that researchers are not happy having libraries around. In Myanmar, there's this limitation from the government. I'll just call it that way. So there's very low internet connectivity, which happened since 2 years ago. So that was 2021, or actually a little earlier than that too. And as I've mentioned, even just the IP address was a problem for them to be able to access international resources or to collaborate with people outside in exchange of scholarly information, which for me is like affected, I think, if I may, this would be open for discussions later. It's affected by the power dynamics from the national level. So, but then on their end, they haven't introduced issues on or topics that I would consider, we just mentioned about, or in our discussion about LGBTQ, but I was talking about marginalized groups and indigenous groups, because we know there are various states in Myanmar. And it's not part of the discussion. It's like kind of closed discussion for now. There's a bit of a language barrier, although there's the national language, but there's still an existence of language barrier, as they mentioned. But there's no division between like support for open science and social science. So that's a good thing, I believe. In the Philippines, there was a fear of plagiarism and big concern in patents, that they don't want everything to be open access. In Thailand, the only problem they have is the open access publishing is expensive. Although the government and some institutions and major universities are also funding it. Addressing the challenges, so as I've mentioned, in Kazakhstan, trainings are provided for librarians by the Nazarbayev University Library, School of Library Technology. Trainings are conducted annually. In South Asia, they said like they're promoting national level awareness. In Sri Lanka, they highlighted the works that they're working on: collaboration, capacity building for librarians, looking for funding, more funding support externally, and policy harmonization among universities and infrastructure development. As to implementation pathways, it's kind of just a little more repetitive, but what I just wanted to highlight is that at least Kazakhstan is somehow moving forward, with some universities being actively involved from the library to the university level or the institutional level. In Sri Lanka, there are some initiatives that has been done by institutions and by librarians. In Southeast Asia, they're hoping for more reskilling of librarians to deepen understanding of what is this discussion on open science and open access is. And they are thinking of international cooperation as a way for them to understand better the perspective. In Myanmar, they're hoping for more collaborations with international organizations as well, considering that some of the projects which used to be available has been halted, and they're hoping to promote their new project on open science to involve the community as well. In the Philippines, although it's quite simple, but they were still looking forward to enhance awareness of all stakeholders, not only of the librarians, and more studies to be conducted. They thought like studies could probably be one of the ways to address, or deeper studies could probably be one way to address the resistance or the issues they have. And of course, there's still a need for librarians to lobby for the government. When it comes to Thailand, they're already on the way towards creating a national policy. The government academic institutions are more involved, and they're working more on trainings on research data management and data science. I just wanted to quickly highlight it. I might be eating a lot of time now. So issues of political disruptions, as I've seen, is as one issue, and the passive response of the government are some of the problems. And another thing is that, as I have mentioned, we are libraries in these countries, at least selected countries in Asia, are geared towards bottom-up approach, where the implementation of open science comes from the bottom level, from the library level. So probably there's a need of more support. I have a bunch of recommendations, but just to summarize this, it's more of incorporating gender equality, disability inclusion, and social integration. Probably for me, there's something unique, while not, well, for me, like we're already talking about AI and emerging technologies. I just believe, or probably coming from Vanuatu and the Philippines, I just probably believe that more studies on traditional knowledge sharing are crucial to tailor open science practices and communication strategies to specific cultural contexts, contextualization, the issue that we're saying. Library associations must start discussions on open science towards creating a more cohesive and coordinated work. In Kazakhstan, probably it's also interesting to investigate to see impact of local knowledge sharing, because I know there were. In Bangladesh, I think it's my fault. There's a need to gather more quantitative data, observe the varying levels of implementation. In Sri Lanka, they have quite good practices that could be a basis for implementation, specifically from SLTC. And one thing I wanted to highlight for Myanmar is that they needed strongly regional and international collaboration, given that they are not part of the agenda or the priority agenda of the government right now. but they are safe. That's what I can say. In the Philippines, a space for scholarly discourse on open science, specifically at various levels and in the library. For Thailand and Malaysia, I think they already are into it, so they just need to tailor trainings for librarians with on highlighting inclusivity. And last but not the least, I know the study needs to have a broader, deeper data gathering to involved in order to have a better picture of the implementation pathways. So I guess these are all. Thank you so much for listening.
Great.